35, solving problems and making decisions. Okay, so a lot of times we solve things through trial and error. We try things again and again in different ways, slightly changing it, and eventually come to the conclusion. Other times we use algorithms. Algorithms are methodical, logical rules or procedures that guarantee solving a particular problem. Honestly, if you think of a math formula, that's an example of an algorithm. Now, algorithms are helpful because they are accurate, but they are lengthy. They take a long time. So most of the time, our brain operates by using heuristics, which are simple thinking strategies that allow us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently. They go quickly. However, heuristics can be error prone, especially when we're dealing with more complex subjects like humans. Now, sometimes we also experience insight, and we've talked about this before, where you just kind of have a sudden realization to a problem. Now, let's talk about some of the issues with our kind of cognition when we're dealing with problem solving and some of the obstacles to that. So one is confirmation bias. So humans do this in general. Basically, confirmation bias is when we tend to look and seek out information that confirms our beliefs and disregard or ignore information that contradicts our already held beliefs. So, if you're a person who, let's say, believes global warming is not real, confirmation bias would be exhibited if you're only looking for information that confirms that global warming isn't real and disregarding or ignoring or even forgetting information that contradicts your belief. Now, functional fixedness or fixation, we did an activity in class with this today, but this is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. With functional fixedness, this is like where you're unable to see the function of a certain item being anything other than its intended purpose. And this represents a mental set. So a mental set, kind of like a perceptual set where we are primed kind of to perceive something in a particular way. A mental set is where we are primed to respond to a problem in a particular way because of how we've responded in the past and it being effective. Now, let's talk about forming decisions and judgments. Now, a lot of the times we do follow our intuition, which is actually good. It's effortless, it's immediate, it's automatic, and oftentimes, actually, we find that when we kind of distract people from thinking about a problem and they have to just go off intuition, they often make good decisions. However, sometimes our kind of brain's natural way of just making decisions can be inaccurate. So one example of this is the representative heuristic. This is where we estimate the likelihood of events in terms of how well they seem to represent a particular prototype or stereotype, which may lead us to ignore other relevant information. So for example, if I gave you this profile, someone who's short, slim, wears glasses, likes poetry, are they more likely to be an Ivy League English professor or a truck driver? Most people say an Ivy League English professor. The problem with this is that with the representative heuristic, we often fail to compare the base rates, okay? There are only 400-ish Ivy League English professors. There are millions of truck drivers. So the probability is that actually it's a truck driver who fits this profile based on statistical probability. However, our brain, that picture does not fit our prototype of a truck driver. So it's much harder for us to categorize it, even when it's not as actually probable. Now, another heuristic is called the availability heuristic. This is where we estimate the likelihood of events based on their availability in our memory. So, for example, if you're someone who watches the news a lot, and I asked you, how often are school shootings taking place? You might be more likely to overestimate how often those take place than someone who isn't watching the news all the time, because for you, it is more easily available to your memory for you to recall it. And so thus we overestimate how frequent it is or the likelihood of that event taking place. Now, I'll talk more about this part in class, but in general, the more kind of emotionally stirring it is for us, it's easier for us to recall. And so then it is estimated more likely than things that are more neutral or we don't see it in such an emotional, intense fashion. Now, overconfidence, we've talked about this before. Overconfidence is the tendency to be more confident than correct and to overestimate the accuracy of our beliefs and judgments. Now, something that's funny that I do all the time that the book talks about is the planning fallacy. This is where we are overconfident that we will have more time and more money in the future than we will. So if you're a person who's like, yeah, I'll sign up to do that thing, thinking that you're just suddenly going to have all this time, and then when you get to that time, you don't, that's an example of the planning fallacy. And it's a type of overconfidence that you are having more of these resources like time and money than you normally do. And then kind of similar to confirmation bias is belief perseverance. This is where one person will cling to their own initial beliefs after the basis on which they were formed, even though it's been discredited. So, if you believe the earth is flat and someone discredits you and you just will not get rid of that belief, even though somebody's presenting you with arguments that that's not true, that would be an example of belief perseverance. And then framing is another way that can affect our decisions and judgments. So the way an issue is posed or how an issue is worded can significantly affect our decisions and judgments. So for example, when presenting patients with a procedure, if you say only 10% die versus 90% live, even though that is the same exact information, patients respond much better to the latter proposition than the first, because they hear die and they're like, oh my God, versus 90% live. That creates more of a positive connotation. Now, I'd like you to test yourself, and I will see you later.